I have never met Sas Petherick, but they have coached a lot of people who coached and taught, in fact, a lot of people who have coached me. So the ripple effects of her work have reached me in many and various ways. Sas is a self-belief coach, and the reason I've invited them onto the podcast is that I'm really interested in the connections between self-doubt and despair, the connections between self belief and what I call defiant hope, and the ways that the things we believe about ourselves are connected to the things that we believe about the world. And I recorded this episode a couple of weeks ago now, but there are phrases and questions that Sass raised that are still ringing around my head. I have been asking myself, how can I take exquisite care of myself in this moment daily since this conversation? So I hope it has the same impact on you. And I will stop talking and let you listen to Sass. Sass, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. Before we dive into my usual first question, you and I have something in common, which is that we both have surnames that are connected to Cornwall, which is fun because you're currently sitting in New Zealand. So I would love to know. Little Petherick is a village just outside Padstow, and Tregiddon is a tiny hamlet down on the Lizard. Do you know what the Cornish connection is?
Well, clearly we were connected in a past life.
I love this.
Clearly. But yes, my husband's family have their genealogy extends back to St. Petrock in
Ah,
and
okay.
Cornwall.
Yeah.
So we actually went to Little Petherick, and because my husband wanted a photo by the sign,
I have that
and
photo next to the Tregiddon
yeah,
sign.
as we were standing there, there were all of these like whooping and cheering from inside the tiny village hall, and I was like, oh, they are recognizing that the king has returned, But it was just a Zumba class.
Oh, I love that. I love
Hmm.
that. My sister-in-law is always saying I should go back to Tregiddon with a flag and just reclaim it for our family.
Yeah, why not?
It's a very
No one will
lovely,
stop you.
right? It's a very lovely hamlet, and there's one house in particular that me and my dad are both like, that would have been nice if that one had stayed in the family.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah, for
I think my
sure.
dad traced our family tree back to 1706 in Redruth, which is very near where I live
Wow.
now. Didn't quite get as far back as connecting us with the village, but I mean, it must be, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
for
Oh,
sure.
amazing. I
Love
love
that.
that we're on opposite sides of the planet in this tiny little overlap of our time zones, and yet both have
Completely.
connections to Cornwall.
And it's reminding me, Kate, that in Aotearoa, where I am and where I grew up, in Māori culture, we introduce ourselves with what's called a mihi mihi, which is
Mm.
where you actually share your mountain, your river, and your land.
Oh,
So instead of saying, yeah, I work in IT, we actually, that's a formal greeting. It's beautiful.
oh,
It's
I
so
love that.
poetic. And isn't it so lush to kind of place yourself in the land
Yeah,
that you are part of?
yeah,
I think it's something we're sort of forgotten. We sort of feel like we're wandering around talking heads, and because so many of us live in more urban places.
yeah.
But it always reminds me, and I think because I'm so steeped in it right now, being back here, there is this very rich, deep connection to having your feet on the land and to recognizing that you are part of that.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I had a
Mm.
really interesting conversation recently with Gillian Burke for the book I'm writing about indigeneity and what it means to be
Mm.
indigenous to a place. And
Mhm.
her definition, which I love, is that you can speak the language of the land.
Oh,
And I just thought
yes.
that was such a lovely, inclusive kind of definition. It's not about, because in Cornwall, people say you have to have 7 consecutive generations born on each side and each side and each side and each side, right?
Oh,
So,
wow.
I mean, very few people can call themselves Cornish by that definition, but speaking the language of the Cornish landscape is
Mm.
something we can all aspire to, right? Which,
Mm.
yeah,
Mm.
but I love
Well,
that
and
idea.
and in Te Reo Māori, the word whenua means land and it also means bone. So like it's that those
Yeah.
lovely kind of dual meanings, I think. It just brings it really back home. I love it. I
I
love
love that.
being from here. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's Really cool. And Cornwall reminds me so much of New Zealand as well. So
Oh,
it's lovely to sort
nice.
of have two homes. Yeah.
I've never been, so I wouldn't know, but that's
It's a
lovely.
bloody long way.
It is. It's a very, very long way. Right, before we dive into too much juicy conversation, Sash, I need to ask you to introduce yourself. Cornish connection sorted. Could you start by telling us a little bit about what you do and how you came to do what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I am a self-belief coach, basically. And I didn't always do this work. If you'd met me about 15 years ago, you would have met a very different person. So I was quite ambitious, grew up in a very tiny town in New Zealand and couldn't wait to get the hell out and just moved to progressively bigger cities and got bigger jobs until I was working in the giddy heights of the City of London in financial services for quite a few years. And I think it was my third burnout. I realized I need to make a change. Like this is no longer feeling satisfying. And um, I'll fast forward through the montage scene, but over the course of a few years, I uh, received coaching and had a wonderful experience of it. Also had a shit ton of therapy, and then decided, oh, maybe I could explore that a little further and retrained as a coach. Ended up going back to graduate school, did an MA in the psychology of coaching, and my dissertation was on the experience of self-doubt because it was something that I had experienced so much. Um, but it was a surprise often when I shared that with people because they're like,
Mm.
but you're like quite a get shit done kind of person. And that is surprising. And I'm like, yeah, well, I covered that up with a lot of Pinot Noir, you know? So as I sort of, got sober and was more interested in like my emotional life and my interior world, I found that actually, a lot of my ways of coping were about masking my own self-doubt.
Yeah.
And walking through that portal has actually allowed me to have a much more meaningful, rich, braver life. And so I really want that to be something I can share with others. And yeah, I'm thrilled that I get to do this work. I get to work with the best humans.
Many of
15
whom
years
who have
later.
coached me. So
Yeah,
thank you for the ripple effect.
the ripple effect is wondrous. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's cool. So yeah, and now I get to I run a couple of programs. I work with coaches and support them as well. Which is for me, it's like giving something back to the industry that has kind of birthed me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great fun. I love
It's
it.
so interesting because there's so many parallels with our stories. I also grew up in a very small town in Cornwall, worked in corporate London for 12 years, um, burnt out, drank too much, got sober, retrained. Like it's so interesting how our paths have followed such similar lines. And there was actually a line on your website that made me laugh out loud in recognition, which said, I've been a pleasure to have in class since 1977. What
Truly, truly.
but what is it about those people who have that line in their school reports of a pleasure to have in
Yeah.
class?
Yeah. Well, we are, I feel a real kind of connection to folks who recognize that in themselves. It's like, it's like, tell us what to do and we'll do it. We
Mm.
get shit done. We will do the best we can. We are usually quite good at following instructions, all of that. And then I think something happens and we go, hang on a minute. The person at the front of the classroom is making it up as they go along,
Mm.
and they don't actually have all the answers, and they certainly don't have all the answers for me. And I think that usually happens midlife-ish, and I think that's the invitation where we get to go, but what do I think? What do I want? What brings me pleasure?
Yeah,
And can I return back to myself, meet myself?
yeah.
And what does that open up for me? And usually it's like all the fears of what might happen if you're not actually that much of a pleasure for everybody else, but you choose to start pleasing yourself.
And there's such interesting questions that I think when I first started asking them of myself, I didn't know. because I just wasn't in the
Yeah,
habit of asking myself, what do I want? And when somebody asked something
yeah.
of me, the answer was yes. I never stopped to think, do I actually want to do this thing? Have I got capacity to do this thing? Is this thing in alignment with my
Yeah.
goals? It was just like, oh, well, someone's asking me, so sure, yeah, I'll do it. And
Yeah.
it's when you create
Yeah.
that pause to just sort of say, actually, do I want to do this? And what do I want to do?
Mm.
If not, it's a time of great unraveling in my experience before you start putting the pieces
I
back
think
together.
I think you're so right. That was certainly my experience. I think it's been the experience of everyone I've worked with. There is this, it's almost like our center shifts.
Mm,
We move somewhere different and it's new territory and we often kind of don't have a map and we're a bit like, ugh, I don't know. I don't know. And often, when I ask people, what do you want to do? They'll say not this or I don't know. And I've come to see that as like the perfect place to start.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where it starts, isn't it? I have a
Mm.
distinct memory of walking up Tottenham Court Road on a rainy Tuesday morning, and I worked in client services in advertising. It was quite common to cry in the toilets during the working day. It was quite common to drown your sorrows with a bottle of wine in the evening. But I remember walking up at Tottenham Court Road on a rainy Tuesday morning, crying in anticipation of the day ahead. And I think that was my not this moment. It was like I'm not even there
Yeah.
yet, and I'm already crying. Like I think we're done. And then yeah,
Yeah.
it took me another couple of years to actually extract myself. But looking back, I think that was definitely the not this moment.
Yeah. I used to have a fantasy that I'd have in some sort of minor accident
Yes.
on the way to work
Yeah.
or at lunchtime, something, nothing on the face, but it would take me out for about 6 weeks. And it was like I now look back and I think, oh, there was so much in that fantasy because I imagined myself in the hospital not having to do anything.
Yeah.
Mobiles weren't allowed and people would take care of me. Like
Yeah.
that's what I was craving because I
Yeah.
was holding too much.
Yeah, yeah.
So I
I can
think,
remember
and I felt,
distinctly that, like, maybe I'll just get hit by a car on the way to work. And like you say, it won't be so bad, but it'll just
won't
be
be
bad
bad.
enough that I'll get some rest. Isn't that
Yeah.
awful?
Well, I think this is a symptom of capitalism, right? That's
Mm,
where I've come to see it, is actually many of our workplaces aren't that invested in what brings our soul alive,
yeah. and or even
and
what keeps
what,
us at a bare level of well-being, right?
right? Like there's some quite inhumane practices out there. I think things are moving and improving, of course, but I think if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my God, I have that fantasy, then yeah, it's just a little invitation. What do you want to do about that?
Yeah, yeah. And that's where the interesting stuff starts, I think.
That's when it gets really cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Now, people might be thinking the subheading of this podcast is conversations about hope, and we're talking a lot about
Yes.
self-doubt. But the reason that I think Sas is such an interesting guest for us is that I believe, and I'd be interested to see what you think about this, that there is a correlation between self-doubt and despair, and a correlation between self-trust and hope. And certainly in my experience, and the reason I've created a lot of the kind of courses. I've got one called Cultivating Hope, which I created for myself to pull myself out of despair. And I definitely feel like there was self-doubt in amongst that despair and then self-belief in amongst the hope when I found my way back to
Mm,
it. Does that resonate?
totally. 100%. Yeah. I think at the moment, we're recording this in 2025, which has already been a year of kind of shock and awe and
Yeah.
lots of real, like, collective grief about the state of the world. We're absolutely living through a polycrisis,
Yeah.
that there's everywhere you look. And I think those conditions are ripe for despair. Of
Mm,
course, I think it's an incredibly natural response to feel grief and despair. I don't want us to live there though. I
mm,
don't want us to live there. And I think for me, this work around self-belief can seem a bit like on the surface, a little superficial potentially. The way I see it is that it's actually the invitation of your life to really fully express who you are And I believe, and I've never seen any evidence to the contrary, that people who experience healthy self-belief are the ones that will heal the world. They're the ones that will create and share and speak and gather and invent and innovate and lead. And
Yeah.
so for me, the outer and the inner are very much mirrors of each other.
Hmm.
And so the converse is true as well. If you are experiencing a lot of self-doubt and despair, it will be what you see. It will
Yeah.
be what you experience. And I think the biggest part for me of despair, and I'm no stranger to that emotion at all, is what can I do? I don't really matter. These problems are so complex and
Yeah.
so big. The challenge ahead of us feels insurmountable. What's the point,
Yeah,
almost,
what's
you
the
know?
point is funny as you were
What's the
talking
point?
that when I'm really low, that is the exact phrase that comes into my head is what's the point?
Yeah,
I mean, what's the
yeah,
fucking point? It's the exact phrase.
yeah, yeah, completely. I'm
That's
with
it.
you. And I think the paradox is, yep, we're all tiny. We're all completely small beings doing small things. And what I would say is that every small thing you do to create the world you want to live in has epic ripple effects
Yeah.
that you may not see. So for me, I look at what's happening in Palestine on the Gaza Strip, and I am in full despair and hopelessness about that situation. And what can I do? I can donate, I can march, I can do those things. One of the most powerful things that I've decided to do is to remove the energy of war from my field. I will not go into battle with anyone. I refuse to be seduced into that binary that someone has to be right, someone has to be wrong, and that we need to have some sort of argument, which to me is, a kind of entry level into war. Like, I just won't do that anymore. I'm like, you know what? That's not something that you're going to, invite me into, and I'm not going to accept that invitation.
So
So,
interesting. So this
do
kind
you
of
know what
taking
I
this
mean?
this
Yeah.
huge awful thing that's completely out of our control, bar as you say, things like donating, who we vote for, writing to MPs, that sort of thing, and actually looking at how that energy shows up in our own lives and how we can change that at the tiny level.
Yeah.
That's a really
Yeah.
interesting response.
I had someone just back into my car. Oh, I think no, he rear-ended me. This young man rear-ended my car. It was an accident. He was going a bit fast. Where we went to a stoplight, he hit me. And I got out of the car and I was like, "Are you okay?" And he was visibly like shocked. He expected someone to be super angry. And I was just like, "Are you all right?" He was probably 17, 18. He was like,
Yeah,
oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, oh God. And he was really obsessed with the dent. And I was just like, mate, it's okay. It's not that bad. Like, I'm just, are you all right? Are you all right to drive? Let's just stand here for a minute and breathe. Like, and he fully expected me to be angry,
yeah,
like wanting retribution in some way.
yeah,
And I was just like, because I remember feeling it and going, oh, bugger, I've been hit. And
yeah,
not being able to feel angry about it for a start. Like that was a genuine response.
yeah,
But I also thought, oh, I hope the other person's all right. And then it was this young guy. And he has now had that experience that
yeah,
actually the worst thing that can happen is, nothing. We exchanged numbers. We had a lovely text exchange over the couple of days. It was fine.
yeah.
And he was so grateful. And I was like, next time someone hits you, you know what to do.
I'll say on,
And it
yeah.
was, and it was just like this tiny incident, but there's a ripple effect to that. His
Mm.
mum texted me, she was all in it and everything. And I was like, honestly, it's so fine. But I just thought that it's that kind of thing that I mean. I will not be invited in to
Yeah,
a battle with a
yeah,
person. I'm going to treat you like a human.
yeah,
And that feels to me like I am somehow contributing to the world I want to live in.
yeah. And I think it's really interesting. I read a couple of books back to back, and so I can never remember which one was in what, but I read Emergent Strategy and Rebecca Solnit's Hope in the Dark kind of back to back, and perhaps in both of them, but definitely in one of them, they were talking about that idea of, we sort of think we've got to fight and struggle and work
Mm.
until we save the
Mhm.
world, until we bring about the future that we want. And then some magical day, someone's going to declare our work done. And then we
Yeah.
can, I think in this case, they were talking about rest and taking care of ourselves. Whereas actually
Yeah.
we have to embody the world that we want to bring about. And that can feel
Yeah.
really counterintuitive. I think a lot of my listeners are purpose-driven founders who are burning themselves out trying to do good in the world. And I
Mm.
think it can be really counterintuitive to say actually the best thing I can do for the world today is meditate or go and
Oh,
stand with my feet in
yeah.
the grass or whatever it is.
The irony of, purpose-driven founders, right, who are values-led
Yeah,
humans, who have a real sense of mission, like all of that. You need to be taking exquisite care of yourself in the same way that you are trying to take exquisite care of the planet, of the people you work with, of the businesses you run. Like, that's the point. That's the whole point.
yeah. That is, I've got a little note on my phone which says taking care of myself is the work, taking care of myself is the change, just to kind of
Yeah,
remind me, because I think
yeah,
it's so easy to sort of think whatever the means are justify the end.
yeah,
Whereas I think
yeah,
I mean, be the change you want to see, right? Is the kind of
yeah,
famous
yeah.
quote around that.
Yeah. It can feel quite cliched and quite sort of like, oh yeah, I need to rest. We still worship the altar of busy.
Yeah.
We still drive ourselves far too hard. We may as well be crying in the loos before work when we're working for ourselves.
Yeah.
And to me, I think it is an act of rebellious defiance against extractive exploitative capitalism to take exquisite care of yourself.
Mm. I love that phrase as well. Not just take care of yourself, but take exquisite care of
Yeah.
yourself.
That's intentionally added in
Yeah.
because people think it's, get 4 hours sleep, I'll be all right.
Yeah.
No, you need 8.
I mean, I need
Stay in
10.
bed,
I
to be
really do
fair.
need 10. I am
Yeah.
a human who needs a lot of sleep. But it is,
Yeah.
when you're fighting against that, real CEOs can survive on 5 hours sleep
Mm,
nonsense.
mm.
And, I'm someone who needs even more than 8. It's so
Yeah.
hard to sort of say
Yeah.
to people, actually, that's too early for me or that's too late for me.
Yeah. And I think it's also, um, to me, I've seen this pattern a lot and I share it as well. So I've lived it. When your kind of self-belief is in a bit of shadow, there tends to be this tendency to overwork. It's
Yeah.
like, the good stuff around self-belief, which for me is about your values, the vision you have for your life, how you lead yourself towards what you're creating. The way that you encourage yourself and speak to yourself along the way. All of that are sort of the elements of self-belief. When that's in a bit of shadow, there tends to be a sense of I'm not doing enough, I'm doing too much, and there's that real tension. We tend to overwork. It feels like we'll never be good enough. And so there
Yeah.
is a sense of proving energy with that. And I think when you come back to, oh no, real self-belief is actually about what are my values and am I living them? And am I
Yeah.
living them in a way that helps me take exquisite care of
Oh,
the
I'm feeling
human?
so called out, Sas.
Because what's the point, right? If you are like, yeah, man, I founded this amazing company and we make, I don't know, algae that eats plastic in the ocean. Fuck yeah. Like that's amazing. If you are completely malnourished and knackered
Yeah.
because of the way you are doing that, almost what's the point?
Yeah.
Like I think that's the inverse of what's the point,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm making notes. Um, you talk about your work as being helping people to create a brave life filled with compassion, meaning, and joy. And I know that's a sentence you will have put together carefully. So I'm interested to know what that looks like and why those particular words in that sentence.
So brave as in do the shit you want to do because you want to do it.
Mm.
Right? What self-doubt does is it says hold yourself back because you might hurt yourself.
Yeah.
You might experience judgment or rejection or failure or disappointment, all those things that we worry about, those risks. Do it anyway,
Yeah. I mean,
and
we
have the
experience all
rest,
those things doing the work we don't want to do, don't we? So we might as well
right?
experience them doing the thing we want to do.
Exactly. And it's kind of like, yeah, and you may need some support to develop the resources to be able to walk through that,
Hmm.
and not kind of fold in on yourself. I know I certainly did. But when you can do that, what you create as a result is a more meaningful life, right? It is a life that has more experiences of joy
Mm.
because you are able to be fully expressed as the unique one-off kind of cosmic entity that you are. Like there is never going to be another you. Don't waste it. Like really don't waste it. I mean, I think that's the other part of this work is that you get a bit existential because you start to see every single human being is needed. Like all of us. That's why there's so bloody many of us, I think.
Yeah.
We're all needed for this. And so yeah, meaning is really important. We are meaning making creatures,
Yeah.
right? We can make meaning out of anything. Just ask anyone who's
100%.
read a tarot card,
Yeah.
And it's like amazing. So what meaning do you want your day to include? What does that look like? And meaning is often has a very strong tether to our personal values, like what matters to you.
Mm.
If you can live more moments where your day has meaning, then your life kind of gets better.
Yeah.
It gets to be more fun. Joy, I think, is again something that is totally undervalued and for a lot of us quite a tricky emotion to feel
Mm.
because it can be quite fleeting. It's also for a lot of us, we find it quite hard to trust it.
Hmm.
We have lots of beliefs about joy, what we have to sacrifice to get it, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But actually, it can be super simple. Um, and compassion for me is like it's a very root to my being is compassion. And for very many years, I thought compassion was a bit woolly, bit
Mm.
fluffy. I think it's one of the strongest and most important elements that we can have as humans
Same on.
because compassion is actually really robust. It's not lie on the sofa, watch Netflix, get covered in a blanket of Dorito dust, right? That's what we think it is. That's often, and particularly when I talk to really purpose-driven people, they're like, if I show myself compassion, I'll lose my go-go juice, right?
Yeah, I think there's definitely
My,
that sense
my,
that, yeah, like I have been kicking my ass all this time to get this done. And if I
yeah,
start being kind to myself, I'll never get out of bed again.
right? And
Yeah.
and that's actually a binary, all or
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah.
And it's not true. What if you could do everything that you're doing already and be kinder to yourself?
Mm.
Like that, it's like add
Yeah.
in more of the goodness.
Yeah.
What I found for this has been like a real active practice for me for a long time now. And I think it is helping me to walk through the world seeing hope.
Hmm.
Because when I show myself compassion, I'm just a nicer person,
Yeah.
right? And I'm also way more flexible with others. I'm
Yeah.
able to I can't kind of like the idea of detesting a human just feels completely foreign to me. Yes, the behavior I can totally be like, no, that's not okay. Like it doesn't replace our kind of moral compass.
Hmm.
But I think there's something about every single human has been through stuff that has led them to who they are. So now when I see someone behaving with impunity or just cruelty or in a way that I just think we are so far apart, I think, what the hell happened to you?
Mm.
That you think this is okay. So there is that, it's a different question to ask. It allows compassion. It also allows for hope. I believe and have witnessed so many people change. make change in their own lives, change their responses to things, believe new things about their own capacity and capability. That change is absolutely a thing we can do.
Yeah.
And I think without compassion, you end up with this kind of quite cold, obligatory type approach to change.
Yeah.
And that there's no joy in that. There's no
No.
meaning in that.
No. And it I think it tends not to stick either when you're kind of changing
No.
because you think you quote unquote should and you're beating
Yeah.
yourself with a stick.
Yeah.
Whereas I think when it is driven by kind of intrinsic motivation and it comes from I love
Completely.
myself enough to make this change.
Yeah.
It,
Completely.
yeah, it's a different, maybe slower but longer lasting.
Yeah. And it's uncomfortable too.
Mm,
I think, really our capacity to have the life we really want, I think comes down to our ability to sit in the discomfort it will take to get there.
yeah.
So it's going to be hard enough. Don't be a dick to yourself on the way, right? Like you can be really compassionate with yourself while it's hard.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Because I think there's a big conversation happening, or there's a shift, I guess. When I was growing up, it was all about you work hard, you grind, you hustle, you get your rewards. And I think now there's been a reaction against that. Brilliant. Which is all about protecting my peace and I want ease.
Mm.
And
Mm.
there's this idea, therefore, that it should be easy.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that anything worthwhile. Do I think anything worthwhile is easy? I'm just trying to think if there's an example. I think
Yeah.
most things that are worthwhile require some discomfort, if not hard work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm with you. I think the pendulum swung, right? When
Yeah.
particularly in the last sort of 5, 10 years, we've changed the conversation we have about trauma,
Mhm.
mostly because we all went through a collective trauma of the pandemic. Um, we're much more interested in our emotional well-being than we
Yeah.
ever have, I think, in history, collectively. And so the pendulum swung to the, yeah, protect my peace brigade. And I'm like, yeah, but that actually is deeply unsatisfying and there's not a lot of meaning in it often. It
Mm,
just means you're in a bit of a bubble from the rest of the world.
yeah.
For me, I'm like, let's come back to the middle, which is a bit gritty and it's freaking hard. And yes, there is despair and grief involved, but there's also meaning and joy. And actually, if we can get out of these kind of quite individualized bubbles and work collectively, find our people, figure these problems out. Like I read somewhere, I can't remember who said it. I quote this all the time and I must find out who originated the quote, which is that one of the most fun things to do as a human is solve problems. Like it
Interesting.
uses so many different parts of our brains. It is so stimulating to solve problems.
Yeah.
And for anyone who has like fist pumped the air in an empty room because you got Wordle in two, you know what I mean,
We've
right?
all been there.
We've all been there. And I think that it's everything from a crossword puzzle to can we find some algae that will eat the plastic in the ocean, right?
Yeah.
Like actually, I think the problem solving brings out the best in us.
Yeah.
It's why we dominate the planet.
But
We're
that
not the
requires,
fastest or the strongest, you
yeah.
know?
But problem solving requires some of the things we've been talking about, right? It requires
Yeah,
curiosity. It requires hope that there is a solution to that problem. Probably
yeah,
requires some compassion with ourselves when the first five
yeah.
attempts don't work,
Completely.
especially
Like
on work.
just having that resilience to failure.
Yeah.
Oh shit, that didn't work. Right.
Yeah.
Like so okay, so what else do we try? And I think that's true like for anyone who's running a business or, changing their body composition. I'm deep in that at the moment. It's like not everything happens quickly
Yeah.
or easily. I think, the grit that's in there is important because that's what makes it an achievement.
Yeah.
And it means that we have to do things when we don't feel like doing them or we don't know what the answer is. We have to get into that place of discomfort. And I think that's self-doubt tells us discomfort is to be avoided at all costs.
Uh-huh.
Don't do this, you might hurt yourself. Self-belief says, yeah, it's probably going to be a bit uncomfortable. I've got me.
Mm, yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, it's that. Yeah, it's not that it's going to be easy, but it's that I've got my own back through this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Um, Kind of building on that, you've said that for you, being alive is an unending, meaning-making process of imagination, experimentation, and interpretation. I'd love you to
Mm.
just expand on that a little bit. We've touched on it
Yeah.
already, but
Yeah. Well, it feels like the way I kind of live is like, oh gosh, here I am sitting on a beach at sunrise doing breath work, and I can make, any little thing I can make meaning out of, from like the way the sun's rising and what that metaphorically kind of means to me. You know, where we go for a swim in the sea after, sorry, I live in New Zealand, it is slightly paradise. Um,
I mean,
we
I'm
go
in
for a swim.
Cornwall, so it's like it's colder here, but
Exactly.
the visuals work.
Yeah, and you go for a swim in the sea, and maybe you see a rainbow, or you find the perfect shell afterwards. And for me, it's like, yeah, that's little signs, little synchronicities that make me feel like, yeah, what does that mean? What do I want to interpret that?
Mm,
It's the first chapter of Sharon Blackie's book around the woman who goes for a walk in the woods, and she's stressed as all get out, and she's obsessed with work, and that's all she's thinking about. Versus the woman who walks through the woods and sees the crow
yeah,
and notices that the crow is turning its head in that slightly disturbing humanish way, and so she's like, I wonder what the crow's thinking. And she is in the woods as
yeah.
opposed to walking in the woods. Do you know what I mean? I
But I
think
suppose you
it's
have to
that.
have the mental capacity for that, right? You have to, if you're in a state of fight or flight and burnout and kind of busy brain, it's harder
Yeah,
to access that
yeah.
presence, even when we do the things that are good for us.
Yeah, I think it is. But I think it's also a choice.
Hmm.
And I think there's something about always being cognizant that you're in choice.
Mm,
Right? I can choose to go down this road where I kind of know what's going to happen. I'm going to get tie myself up in thought loops and what have you. Or I can kind of take a breath and just pause for a second and go, okay, how do I want to spend the next 15 minutes? What does that actually mean? And I think the thing is, it feels trite and like, oh, that's too simple. It's incredibly, it's almost disappointing how effective it is. You
It's
know
like,
what I
was
mean?
this all I needed to do all this time?
Yeah, really. Like, and I mentioned earlier, I'm kind of deep in a real like health journey this year, and I've been working with a coach and lifting weights and learning to run and going to the gym and really taking care of myself and my sleep and all of that stuff. Eating my body weight in protein, all of the things you do as a middle-aged lady these days. And I'm like, oh God, that's so annoying how good I feel. Right? And I think, it starts with I'm going to go for a walk first thing in the morning rather than turn on social media.
Yeah,
That's what I'm going to like. We're always in choice around that kind of thing. And I think what I've sort of started to think of is, I've got a battery level and I want to always keep it at about 70%. I want to
mm,
keep it topped up. So that means good sleep, good nutrition, movement, nature, connection. It means those are the things that kind of keep me going. It might be different for other people,
yeah,
but I think there's something about if I can keep my battery topped up when the stress inevitably happens and the grit shows up and there's tension and difficulty, I've got the capacity
yeah,
to respond in a way that actually feels quite good to me. Getting to that, topping up your battery, I think that's the hardest it will ever be. But once you're there, it's like, oh, cool. And now I've got some resources within me. I'm kind of good to go. Yeah.
yeah. I think that's so important because I think I'm in a real, like, probably approaching burnout, kind of big self-doubt. Like, I'm
Mm,
in one of those ruts at the moment. And I said to Jolie, in fact, the other day, who you know, I really need to take care of myself right now. And she's like, Katie, you really need to take care of yourself always. Like, not
Yeah.
just when you feel this. And I think that's the thing is I've let my battery, to continue the metaphor, come down to
Yeah.
like 5%. And like you say,
Yeah.
it's so hard now to get it back up, whereas
Yeah.
keeping it topped up is much easier.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think just how amazing for you to recognize that. Like,
Mm.
oh, actually, I'm down at 5%. Well, that's, I mean, we're obsessed with our phones. We'd never let a phone get to 5%,
You'd be
right?
panicking,
I'd
wouldn't
start
you?
getting a bit anxious, when the 20% sort of thing. So it's like, you're way more complicated than that,
Yeah,
So how great to recognize that you don't have to get to zero.
yeah.
And I think the other part of this is, and you don't need to take 6 weeks off and go to a cabin in the woods,
As
right?
lovely as that would be.
Yeah. It's like maybe go for a walk and maybe have an early night
Yeah,
for the next couple of weeks.
yeah.
It's those incremental small changes that can really make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just building them into your routine so that I am
Mm.
now at a phase of my life where going for a walk first thing in the morning is just what I do. And
Yeah.
that's taken a long time. But that, and no matter, I have chronic health issues. So sometimes I walk to the gym and go and work out. Sometimes I walk around the village and go back to bed. But that walk has become
Yeah.
non-negotiable.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
just enough time for me to check in with my body and know what the next thing needs to be, which
Yeah.
I think having that flexibility in, as you say, what it is that's going to fill your battery up today, because sometimes
Yeah.
hammering it out in the gym is the most amazing thing I can do. Other times that's just
Totally.
gonna break me. So yeah, it's kind of tuning in enough to know how
Mm.
to top that battery up on that particular
Yeah.
day, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of like the bare ass minimum.
Yeah.
Like what is the bare ass minimum I can do today?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, you know what, I'm gonna get up, make the bed, and make myself a cup of tea.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna feel like, okay, at least my room, my bedroom, my sanctuary is kind of set up for me to
Yeah.
come back to bed later.
Yeah.
It's like that can be it. But recognize and interpret that as this is me taking exquisite care for myself today
Yeah.
because I have 5% to give. That's
Uh-huh.
still 100%.
Yeah, I have a Substack article saved onto my desktop called Things to Do When You Feel Like Shit. And one of
Love it.
them is that if you're going to stay in bed, just get out of bed and lie on the floor because that's practically yoga.
Yeah,
And it's just
love
that
it.
idea of like, I have a little yoga mat right here in my office. And I used to think, oh, I've got to, take a half-hour break and do a yoga with Adrienne sequence. And it's like,
Yeah,
no, I can just lie on my yoga mat. Like some days,
yeah.
3 minutes lying on my yoga mat is what I need actually in that moment. And I think by setting the bar that low, you're more likely to actually do it and then maybe do
Oh,
some
yeah,
stretches and maybe get a quick
yeah,
downward dog in before come back.
totally. I teach, have a course all about goals. And for me, it's like the most important thing you can do is like check in with yourself. Like, what is my capacity right
Mm,
now? How much courage do I have? How much capacity do I have? How much energy do I have? And you're kind of like giving yourself a little like, oh, okay, today the most courageous thing I can do is this
yeah.
towards my goal.
Yeah, I love that.
So it's courage-based goals for me are like forget, doing epic shit every day. Like that's so inhumane. Don't treat
Mm,
yourself that badly. Treat yourself like the ever-changing human that you are,
yeah.
and be kind to yourself. You
Yeah.
can
And I
still
love
get it
that.
done.
Yeah. And checking in on your courage levels as well as your energy levels,
Yeah,
I think is really beautiful
yeah,
because they can be quite different.
totally. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I love that. So one of your clients said of working with you that you honor the complex landscapes, mountains, valleys, rivers, and ruts within each woman. And I just thought that was the most beautiful way of describing kind of your relationship with your clients. Can you tell me a little bit more about
Mm.
those landscapes and how you honor them?
Well, I mean, we have to thank lovely Gail for writing that amazing testimonial, which makes me blush and cringe a little. Can I just say, I don't have that much self-belief. So I think what she means is, for me, I'm like, who are you? I'm so fascinated by people. like who is this glorious example of the universe in human form in front of me? And I know that can sound a bit like blowing smoke up your ass. I do get that. I do get that. But I genuinely also mean that. Like I've got so many tools in my toolbox for sure, and I've been doing this work long enough to know I know what I'm doing,
Yeah.
and I can support you and I get self-doubts inside out. What I don't know is who you are and how self-doubt shows up for you very specifically.
Mm,
And I don't know your interior world. I don't know what your experience of interpretation and meaning making is. Um, but what a joy it is for me to enter into your world and see where we go. So I see every coaching relationship as you and me kind of traipsing those valleys and mountains and rivers. And
mm,
I honestly don't know where we're going to end up,
mm,
but it will be an adventure. And for me, almost the destination doesn't matter so much as who you become as you figure this out. Like, I
uh-huh.
think being willing to explore your self-doubt in a world that says just ignore it or
Yeah.
infantilize it, give it a stupid name and just tell it to shut up or push through it. I think that's all somewhat well-meaning advice, but it doesn't work and it's not particularly helpful in terms of who do you get to be on the other side of that? Whereas for those who are courageous enough to go, you know what, I can never delegate. I am an overworker and a people pleaser. I never delegate and I'm burning out. What the hell is that all about? To be willing to go, I want to explore where that comes from. I guarantee you there is a bloody good reason why you're doing that.
Yeah.
And it will be learned over time, and some of it might be inherited, and it will be maybe about what happened when you were growing up and what you learnt from your family. But I'm more interested in how do we, you and I now in this place in your life, recognize that that has an echo back in the years, but where do you want to go with it? And what would really support you to make sense of that so you can heal it and then, build some resources so you can respond differently and give yourself the evidence that, oh, actually, I don't have to just automatically respond in that way. I can choose differently.
Yeah.
When you're in choice and you're doing that with some compassion and some understanding, it is so much more liberating than I'm just going to call it Barbara and tell it to shut up, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I loved about that description was the kind of nature metaphor and the idea that there is this wild landscape within us and there is also a
Yes.
wild landscape around us. And I think
Yes.
particularly women and non-binary folk and kind of people who were either assigned female at birth or now identify as women in their middle years, there seems to be a real, what I call a call of the wild. There seems to be a real sense of wanting to connect that inner wild with an
Mm.
exterior wild. Um, and you've mentioned some of the beautiful wild spaces in New Zealand. Is that something
Mm.
that you see happen with your clients? And if so, why do you think that's happening? Why is there this specific moment in our lives when we suddenly want this
Mm.
connection with nature?
Well, I think the reason that it is particularly true for us humans that identify as women is that we often, for much of our lives, have the burdens of a shit ton of emotional labor and care and taking, we still do most of the housework, we still do most of the caregiving. So there's a lot occupying our lives up until the point of midlife. Um, and even for those who are childless by choice or who don't have children, I think we can sometimes express that those expectations are given to us in workplaces and community
Yeah.
places as well. But I think something does happen, and my friend Steph, who really works with the archetypes of womanhood, talks about the maiden mother crone is the kind of archetype of a woman's life. There's actually a fourth stage between maiden and between mother and crone, which is unfortunately called Marga, which is
I've
has
had it
been
called
obviously.
I've had it called the Enchantress, and Jolie actually came on the podcast to talk to us a little bit about this kind of
Yeah,
extra
yeah,
phase that I certainly haven't heard of, but it's also known as Margot.
yeah. Yeah, it's from the Greek and of maga, which basically is mystic.
Okay.
So Enchantress doesn't surprise me at all that Jolie is on this completely. I think that what happens when we enter that phase, and for me, it's that kind of emerging crone phase, which I'm
Mm,
living through now in my early 50s, where we start to kind of go, okay, well, I'm past halfway. Who do I want to be? What is alive for me right now? And I think it's often a time of remembering that we are nature, we are creatures, we do have these wild landscapes within us. Often our desires have had to take a back seat. We've often very willingly chosen that so that we can have the joy of raising tiny humans. Um, and now there is space and time and often more resources available to us where practically we can entertain some of those desires. I think it's absolutely no accident that we are seeing a real trend of what's being called quite euphemistically the silver splitters, which is women that enter their 50s, often read Miranda July's book, All Fours, and then like ditch their marriages.
yeah.
Or they sell all their stuff and go buy a van and toot around the country.
Yeah.
Or they have a career change or something. They bring
Yeah.
in a new hobby or they start lifting weights, whatever it is. Like something happens in this time period. I've seen it in the culture, I've seen it in clients, I'm experiencing it myself. There is something that happens at this time of life where we go, yeah, there is a wildness in me that
Mm,
is yearning to be honored in some way.
yeah.
How am I going to do that? I don't think everyone does honor that, or even maybe recognize it. It might just feel like a shit ton of restlessness, like dissatisfaction, and maybe we just go, "Oh well, but life's easy, and now I get to enjoy the fruits of my labor, and we might continue on."
Yeah.
But I do think there is a decent percentage of us that go, "This can't be ignored.
Yeah.
If I am going to milk the shit out of this one wildlife, I better listen."
Yeah.
And so I think that really is where things get interesting. It is often when people seek out coaching support, therapeutic support to go, who the hell am I now?
Mm,
Because I've never been this me before, and I'm kind of not sure what she wants, but it's maybe not this, or I don't know. Like
yeah.
it's often a time where we kind of meet that uncertainty.
Yeah. I
Um,
love that. I love that. I've
that's
never been this me before. That's a
mm,
beautiful way of looking at it. And I think you're right about the. So I recently turned 46, and that,
mm,
let's assume you're going to live to 90 if you're really lucky and stay healthy for all that time. 45 is bang in the middle, right? And so my 46th birthday was a real like, oh shit, I'm definitely in the second half now. And I was
yeah.
sort of feeling really like panicky about that. Like I'm running out of time. I've got to. And then somebody pointed out that in the first half of your life, you have your childhood, you have your teenage years, you have your 20s. You waste half of the first half just figuring it out, don't you? And kind of
Yeah.
having so much time when you've got no agency at all. But
Yeah,
actually in the
yeah,
second half, we've done that. We've had the therapy.
yeah,
We've kind of
yeah,
we've got the whole second half to ourselves in a way, which I think is quite.
yeah.
I mean,
And it's all
God
to
willing.
play for, you know?
Yeah.
James Hollis, who is a really lovely writer and therapist, writes about the second half of life. And Richard Rohr, who is a Franciscan priest, I think, he has a book called Falling Upwards, which I recommend. I know they're both white men, but bear with me. I think they're both really lovely entry points into exploring this. So if you're just feeling that restlessness and you don't want to go straight to Miranda July, they can be quite good.
I love that normally the book that gets referenced on this podcast, and I joke about it because it comes up every time, is Braiding Sweetgrass. And I love that we've gone straight
Yeah,
into all fours. It's a different
yeah,
vibe, but I'm here for it.
different vibe.
I'm so here
But
for it.
I do think that there is this transition period in this time of life. And the first half is often about, just figuring it out. Like we're
Yeah.
learning so much. And in the second half, it's like, what do I want to share? Where's the meaning?
Mm,
What is it that I'm here to do? There's often that. And I think, for those of us who identify as women, that this can be the best time. I
mm,
think we need to collectively just bin off all the shite that's out there about aging. I just think it keeps getting better and better. One of my best friends is in her 70s. She is also my supervisor. And she's like, oh, if only they knew how good it gets. They wouldn't let us get this old. It's like, and she is part sort of Miriam Margolyes and part oak tree. But there is that kind of vibe of like almost don't tell them how good it gets. You will not believe how good you can feel.
yeah. I love this. I'm so here for it. I'm so here for it. I think there's like a little bit in the middle, isn't it, where you're dealing with perimenopause and you're kind of
Yeah.
unlearning the things you've learned before you can get to the bit where you're ready to kind of burst forth. I think as long as we can get
Yeah.
through the sticky middle bit and out
Yeah.
the other side, then
Yeah.
yeah, as
And
you
it
say,
is
it's all to
messy
play
in the
for.
middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it always is, isn't it? I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and I said, I think I am in that moment between caterpillar and butterfly when I'm in the goo.
Yes.
And she just went,
Yeah.
babe, you're not in the goo, you are the goo. And it was like, oh
Yeah.
shit, yeah, of course. The
Yeah.
caterpillar doesn't sit there in goo, doesn't it? It becomes goo. And it was just like, that's why
Yeah.
it's so hard.
Well, I love that metaphor, and it's a beautiful one for those transitions because yeah, we dissolve into that goo. The cool thing is, and for those nature geeks out there, you'll know this already. The cells that we become the goo is actually called imago cells.
Okay.
So when a caterpillar dissolves, it turns into this goo that are made up of imago cells, which is the root of imagination.
That's
Now,
so
how
good.
freaking cool is that,
That's such
right?
a good fact.
So the goo has to imagine a butterfly. Now,
Yeah.
if you've spent your whole life as a little caterpillar, how the hell can you even conceive of becoming a butterfly?
Mm,
And I think that's how much of a like total like brain freeze that gets created. It's like I
yeah.
cannot even conceive of what I could become.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the good news is you become the butterfly. You just don't
Either
know it
way,
yet.
yeah, either way, it's coming.
Yeah,
I'm so here
yeah,
for it. So you've lived in both the UK and New Zealand, and I'm really interested to know how some of this stuff that we've been talking about differs in the two kind of, we're not quite opposite points of the globe, but we're a very long way away from each other. How much is the same, how much is different? What wisdom can you
yeah.
throw us on this side of the planet?
Oh my goodness. Well, um, it is quite fascinating to be from two places. Like my parents were from the northeast of England. They grew up in Durham and surrounds. And then I was born in New Zealand. So I've always had this sense of duality in me.
Mm,
And I think, as well, someone once gave me the phrase edge dweller. And I really love that because I've always felt like I never quite fit in both places.
yeah,
And I've come to embrace that sort of, sitting on the edge place. We're both islands of almost the same size,
I didn't know
right?
that. I assumed New Zealand was a
Yeah,
lot bigger.
geographically, no.
Interesting.
Geographically, the British Isles and New Zealand, roughly the same. Quite similar weather as well. Um, Lots of coasts, lots of, there's wild landscapes. I think there's also a really fascinating kind of um, history of the land that's kind of imbued in us too, right? Like in New Zealand, we have Māori culture and Pacifica culture, which is very, our indigenous language. It's very much like about the land.
Mm.
Even the colors in the Māori language are based on the different shades of green on different trees,
Yes,
right?
and
It's so cool,
In Cornish, there are
right?
three words for green in Cornish. And I have had this, it's one of those things where I'm like, do I say this out loud? Because I'm not a native Cornish
Yeah,
speaker,
yeah,
but I have had
yeah,
this verified. There's one
yeah.
word for green, which is organic green. There's another word for green, which is inorganic green. And then the word glass, Glas, basically means whatever colour the sea happens to be right now.
Oh, I
Isn't
love
that
that.
amazing?
Yeah. So we share that, right? There's so much that we share that
Yeah.
we are at opposite ends of the globe. Like, how nuts is it that we share those similar
Mm.
things, those cultural concepts, um, as well? Like, the Celtic. I don't know. I am so enamored with Somerset. That is, I live in Bristol, so I have a home in Bristol. We'll return to Bristol. Um, that Somerset landscape is where I have felt the most, almost like the earth could just take me. Like
Yeah.
I felt the most grounded. The history of those really quite magical Celtic, Druidish, the standing stones, the legends of giants, the drumming, like all of that has echoes here
That's
too.
so interesting.
So for me, I mean, I notice these little echoes and I'm just like, oh, we're all the same.
Yeah.
We are literally connected through legend and myth and story and landscape and color, like and sound, like all of these. And I think, to me, like we've just totally made up this idea that there are nations. Like that's a thing we made up. That isn't actually a true thing. It's the same as money. That's made up too.
Yeah.
Borders, completely humanly made, right?
Yeah.
And so I think we forget that actually there is more that connects us than separates us.
Mm.
So for me, I think, and having the joy of working with hundreds of people over the years around self-doubt and self-belief, I'm left with this really kind of quite poetic sense that, oh my goodness, if you find the people that you gel with, there is nothing that we can't solve.
Mm.
There is no There is no challenge in this epic polycrisis that we have never been here before. Like in the same way I've never met me before, we've never met this planet before,
Mm.
and we have to take care of it. Like there isn't another one. So there's something for me about recognizing that what's within is also a mirror of what's outside of us.
Mhm.
And so I I do say that, I think the emotional state I experience most often is kind of cheerful despair. Like I never want to bypass the reality of how hard it is to live right now and to be in this polycrisis and alive at this time of multiple uncertainties with no real leadership
Yeah.
around that as well. I think that's the most disappointing of it. The lack of moral courage in our leaders is shocking.
Yeah.
And it's such an invitation for all of us to be the leaders we want to see.
Yeah.
And I think as we see these systems of institutions and governments and leadership kind of break down or at least be unveiled to be the very flawed human things that
Yeah.
they have always been, the invitation is what can you do? Like how do you contribute?
Yeah.
So and I think for most of us thinking humans who are conscious of the fact that we do live on a very finite planet, that we need to show up in ways that contribute to that, then however we do that matters. However we do that has meaning.
Mm.
Um, it's hard to talk about this without sounding a bit proselytizing, and I'm resisting
No,
that,
no,
Kate. But
I
yeah.
think you're absolutely right, and that phrase "cheerful despair" really resonated. I talk about defiant
Mm,
hope, and I
yeah.
think because it is an act of defiance right now to
Yeah.
choose hope, to
Yeah.
actively choose, and I think you have to
Yeah.
actively choose it. I
Definitely.
think you'd be insane just to for hope to be the default, right? The default is despair, is
Yeah.
grief, but we have to choose that cheerfulness. We have to choose that hope. And,
Mm.
hence the
It's
podcast.
it's exactly, and it's the paradox, isn't it? That, for me, the most grief-stricken times in my life have always had a thread of humor in them,
Yeah, totally.
right? Like, do not make eye contact with me at a funeral.
Yeah.
And equally, the most joyous moments have had pathos in them because who wasn't there?
Mm,
Or, what was that about? What was underneath that? There's often a thread that runs through both. And
yeah.
I just think, that holding that complexity to me feels, yeah, it's full of meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's that complexity and that nuance that gives it real depth of meaning and stops it being
Mm,
kind of
yeah.
superficial.
Yeah.
So the question I always like to end on is what brings you hope? What are you hopeful about? And how do you hold on to that hope when the despair is threatening to take over?
I am full of hope for us, like our human species. I think we are beautifully flawed and complex, and you just have to like look for the hopeful, innovative leaders that are out there that have a bit of willingness to try some stuff out. The artists that are reflecting us back to each other, the inventors that are coming up with stuff. I was reading this thing the other day about three schoolgirls in South Africa who have come up with a way of creating electricity from the urine. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me?
Wow.
Like, so I'm like, oh, I see stuff like that and it just gives me goosebumps. I think,
Yeah.
yes. So I'm very hopeful. I do think we're going to make it. I think we're absolutely going to solve these problems. I think it's going to be hard. I may not live to see it, but I'm very, very hopeful of our future.
Amazing. What a beautiful note to end on. Thank you so much, Sass. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Me too. Loved it. Thanks, Kate. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, thank
So
you. I
good.
I feel more hopeful. Thank you, Sass. That was
Good.
brilliant. I feel more hopeful
Yeah, you're
now.
so welcome. Yay.